Okay, let's kick off with a number. $210 million.
Wow. That's significant.
Yeah, if I said that's the asking price for something up for auction this fall, private auction, invitation only,
Yeah.
what pops into your head? You know, a huge mansion in Greenwich, a sports team, maybe some rare art.
Right, yeah. Historically, you'd think physical assets,
Yeah.
blue chip stuff, like you say, art, property.
Exactly.
Like it's this. It's completely digital. We're going to dive into this announcement. It came out October 13th, 2025 from the National Domain Association, the NDA.
Okay, the NDA.
They're
Okay.
holding a private auction for, get this, monopoly-grade domain portfolios and the valuation. $210 million.
Monopoly grade domains. Okay, so that's our mission today, isn't it? To unpack how a bunch of, well, website addresses can be worth more than, say, a corporate headquarters.
And crucially, who's trying to buy them? Who needs that kind of digital control?
Right. Control of the language of the internet,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. And these are whole collections, portfolios, sometimes dozens of related domains, all curated. They're designed to be, and this is the NDA's term, digital monopolies that can never be recreated.
Never recreated. Strong words.
Very. And the goal for the buyer isn't just, website traffic. It's about acquiring genuine authority, category-defining authority in markets that are already worth trillions.
Okay, so if you win one of these portfolios, you're not just getting a domain, you're getting the default address for how an entire industry does something important online.
Precisely. The source material quotes the founder saying this is a boardroom race for control of the language of compliance, transparency, and consumer trust.
Wow. Compliance, transparency, trust, those are heavy concepts.
They really are.
Yeah.
And it signals a big shift, doesn't it? The most valuable digital real estate might not be the catchy consumer brand anymore. It's becoming the foundational plumbing, the infrastructure that regulated industries have to use to operate legally and efficiently.
So for you listening, this is really about understanding how value is shifting online, especially in complex areas like healthcare, finance, anywhere regulation is tight.
Absolutely. It's a glimpse into the future valuation of digital infrastructure.
Before we get into the specific portfolios, though, maybe we should talk a bit about the NDA itself, the National Domain Association. Who are they?
Good point. Yeah, the NDA. They were founded back in 2020. Apparently, the people behind it spent about a decade before that acquiring these kinds of foundational domain assets.
Okay. So they were building this inventory for a while.
Seems so. Their stated goal was to bring transparency, standards, and a true marketplace to these kinds of high-value domain assets.
Which makes sense because historically these things traded hands pretty quietly, right?
Yeah.
Backroom deals, private emails.
Exactly. Not like a public stock exchange.
Yeah.
So the NDA is trying to be the authority here. They curate these auctions. They publish something called the Domain Encyclopedia.
Domain Encyclopedia. Okay.
Yeah, and they keep a hall of records for major sales. They're trying to build an institutional framework around these, well, sometimes quite esoteric assets.
Okay, but that raises a question for me then. If their goal is transparency and a true marketplace, why is this auction, the $210 million one, happening privately? Invitation only in Greenwich, Connecticut of all places? Seems a bit contradictory.
That's a really sharp question. And it kind of highlights the tension here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
On one hand, yes, the NDA wants standards for the overall market. But when you're selling something that's genuinely a potential monopoly, especially over compliance language, the potential buyers are likely massive global players, big insurance firms, banks, maybe even governments or sovereign wealth funds.
Right, not everyday investors.
Definitely not.
Right.
And revealing who's bidding to control, say, the infrastructure for AI compliance that could seriously disrupt markets or reveal strategic directions.
Okay, so the privacy is about protecting the bidders and maybe maximizing the price, even if it slightly undermines the open market idea for this specific deal.
I think that's likely the calculation. It's about institutionalizing the asset class, perhaps more than making every single transaction public. Protect the sensitivity of this sale.
Got it. Okay, so the scope of what they are selling here is huge then. You said 170 premium domains.
Yeah, 170 domains across several key sectors: insurance, AI compliance, healthcare data, real estate, clinical research, and even consumer health.
What's the common thread there? Seems diverse.
I think the thread is control over critical data flows, compliance pathways, and mandated trust points. areas where standardization and authority are desperately needed.
Okay, let's dig into one of those then. Healthcare data sounds critical. You mentioned a portfolio called PatientFax.
Yes, PatientFax.
Yeah.
That includes PatientFax.com and PatientFax.org. And it really highlights the problem they're trying to solve. When you think healthcare tech in 2025, you picture AI, right?
Telemedicine.
Sure.
Cutting edge stuff.
What you probably don't picture is the fax machine. But the sources say, get this, over 70% of providers still relying on fax for sharing patient records.
No, 70%. Still.
That's often the baseline for secure communication in large parts of the U.S. healthcare system. It's kind of shocking.
I'm picturing that screeching sound in curly paper. Wow. And obviously that's not ideal for security or efficiency. High PA concerns must be huge.
Exactly. That's the value proposition. PatientFax is positioned as the bridge, moving from those old, insecure analog methods to a modern, HIPAA-compliant digital exchange.
HIPAA being the big U.S. law for health data privacy.
Correct. And the whole industry is under pressure to improve interoperability, how systems share data securely. Mandates are pushing this.
So buying PatientFax isn't just about a brand name. It's about owning the simplest, most intuitive pathway for something doctors have to do securely.
That's the idea. The monopoly aspect comes from that inherent trust and simplicity. If you're a busy clinic needing to send records, or you navigate some complex software portal, or just use something intuitive like PatientFax.com.
Yeah, you default to the simple trusted name. It becomes the standard just by existing and being obvious.
And that makes it incredibly hard for a competitor to replicate that position, even with better tech perhaps. The name itself confers authority.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like owning post or mail in the physical world.
A good analogy. Now let's shift to another area where bad standards cost a fortune. Fraud prevention.
Right. From healthcare communication to financial defense.
And what's really striking here is how these domains directly address enormous existing financial losses. Take insurancefraudregistry.com.
Okay.
That domain anchors a portfolio aimed at tackling the estimated $80 billion annual insurance fraud problem.
$80 billion.
A year.
A year. Just in insurance fraud. Suddenly that portfolio price tag doesn't seem quite so abstract, does it?
No kidding. When you frame it as a tool to fight an $80 billion problem, the domain value is about mitigating massive liability, not just marketing.
Absolutely. And think about the network effect. If the top insurers all start using and feeding data into insurancefraudregistry.com, boom, it becomes the de facto industry standard overnight, the authoritative source. And hard for anyone outside that system to compete or even operate without access.
Precisely. And it's not only insurance. They mentioned DeedFax.com as well.
Deed fraud. Like stealing houses.
Yeah, title fraud. It's a growing problem, especially targeting seniors. Billions lost there, too. So DeedFax.com is positioned as sort of a consumer-facing fraud firewall for property records.
And again, if one major title company brands their security service as DeedFax, the others almost have to follow or risk looking insecure. Creates pressure.
Definitely. And there's an even broader portfolio mentioned, FraudFax.com, which seems to cover the whole spectrum: financial fraud, ID theft, corporate compliance, on top of insurance and deed fraud.
So the buyer is clearly aiming for structural authority across the entire compliance landscape, not just one niche.
Which leads us nicely into the next area, building the infrastructure for the future, specifically AI.
AI compliance. That feels very timely, very necessary.
Extremely. The portfolio led by AIComplianceRegistry.com is designed for companies trying to navigate the absolute maze of global AI regulations popping up. The EU AI Act, U.S. state laws. It's getting complex fast.
So is the product here software, or is it more about owning the authoritative name where compliance is verified?
It seems to be much more the latter. The value isn't just code you build, it's the inherent trust and authority baked into the name itself.
Okay.
Think about it. If a regulator needs to check if an AI model meets standards, where do they look? They need a simple, trusted source. Owning AIComplianceRegistry.com means you own the default place people look to for that validation.
You control the conversation around what compliant even means in practice. That's powerful.
Very. And we see a similar logic applied to real estate and finance.
Right, you mentioned those. NationalPropertyRegistry.com and PrivateMoneyRegistry.com.
Yeah, these target markets that are traditionally quite fragmented, right? Housing data, non-bank lending, lots of different players, varying standards.
True. Lots of opacity.
So these domains are positioned to provide that missing infrastructure level authority. A single source of truth for transactions, for lending standards, standardizing things where standards are lacking.
And sticking with regulated industries, there's also the pharma sector focus.
Yes, nationalclinicaltrialsregistry.com, and it's supported by pharmasponsoredtrials.com. This feels like a direct response to all the global pressure on drug companies for more transparency in their research.
Clinical trial data is a huge public trust issue.
Exactly.
Right.
So if you control the main registry where this data is reported and verified, you essentially control the trusted narrative around drug development and safety.
Again, solving a massive credibility problem for the industry, potentially making that domain portfolio indispensable if it gains traction.
Right. And then, just to show the range, they contrast these big infrastructure plays with something different, a specific consumer health brand.
Yeah, the Mucorex and Mucdixa example.
It's exactly. MeSwiats.com and McPX.com. This is an infrastructure. It's presented as a ready-to-go platform for respiratory health. Diagnose with MucDX, treat with MucRx.
So an end-to-end solution ready to be plugged into a big healthcare company.
Yeah, it shows the diversity. Some portfolios are foundational compliance rails, others are category-defining consumer plays, ready-made. Both are considered monopoly grade in their own way.
Okay, that variety helps explain the overall $210 million figure. But let's put that number in context. How does it stack up against famous single domain sales we've heard about?
That context is crucial, yeah, because the portfolio premium is huge. We've seen big single domain sales. Insurance.com went for $35.6 million.
Okay, big number.
CareInsurance.com, even more. $49.7 million.
That's $50 million.
And even newer tech terms, like Voice.com, sold for $30 million. NFTs.com fetched $15 million. These are massive sums for just one keyword-rich address.
Right. High-value keywords, definitely. But the NDA auction is different.
Totally different. Those sales bought a memorable name, a great digital signpost. The NDA lots, adding up to that $210 million, include entire operating concepts. They include the potential monopoly, the launch-ready brands like PatientFax or AIComplianceRegistry.com.
So you're not just buying the signpost, you're buying the whole pre-approved highway system underneath it.
That's a great way to put it. You're buying the non-replicability, the immediate market legitimacy, what the NDA calls far greater defensibility and scalability than any single domain.
That's why the valuation is sky high. It's the cost of essentially buying established authority, bypassing years of work and regulatory navigation.
Exactly. It's an authority shortcut, essentially.
And just quickly, the logistics confirms the target audience, right? Private, invite-only, NDAs required, bidder vetting. This isn't for startups.
No, this is clearly aimed at major institutions, global corporations, maybe funds, people who can deploy that kind of capital and actually leverage that level of authority.
Okay, so stepping back, wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for listeners? What's the core insight from this $210 million auction?
I think the main takeaway is this fundamental shift in what makes a digital asset truly premium. It's moving beyond just memorable keywords or branding towards foundational, almost invisible infrastructure, the non-replicable plumbing that controls how industries communicate, verify information, and comply with regulations.
Control the language, control the compliance pathway. That seems key.
It really is. And it shows just how quickly these specialized digital platforms for compliance and data integrity are becoming dominant essential assets in regulated fields. This auction is like a massive flashing sign pointing to that trend.
It's accelerating.
Definitely. And that leads to a pretty profound final thought, doesn't it?
Go on.
Well, if a startup today wants to disrupt, say, insurance fraud, they now know the core language, the default infrastructure, is potentially being bought by a giant for potentially part of this $210 million package.
Right. The barrier to entry just got astronomically higher?
Exactly. So the final question really is, if controlling the digital language of compliance and trust is now a 9-figure asset, what happens to the big companies, the incumbents, who fail to secure that language for their own sector?
They risk becoming dependent on whoever did buy it, maybe even a competitor?
They could end up having to pay rent to use the very infrastructure that defines trust in their own industry. That's a precarious position to be in.
A very provocative thought to end on. Owning the language itself.